the 17th of August, the first commercially available compact disc was produced by Sony in Germany, a 1979 recording of Chopin's Waltzes for Piano. British TV viewers had had a sneak preview of the technology the year before on Tomorrow's World, when the latest Bee Gees single had been demonstrated. 3 days later, the ongoing fighting in Lebanon between Syrian, Israeli and Palestinian forces, as well as domestic Christian and Muslim factions, was brought to a temporary and uneasy halt with the deployment of the multinational force in Lebanon, peacekeepers comprising US, British, Italian and French troops, including the famous French Foreign Legion, who would have a very difficult job on their hands trying to prevent further violence. And on the Saturday of race weekend, the first Gay Games opened in San Francisco, which would see 1,350 athletes from 10 countries compete in 16 sports. Although prevented from using the name Olympics for legal reasons, the Games began in similar fashion, with a torch relay beginning at the Stonewall Inn in New York. Meanwhile, the F1 world headed to France for the Swiss Grand Prix. Motor racing had been banned in Switzerland in the aftermath of the horrific 1955 Le Mans disaster, where a collision on track had resulted in the deaths of 84 spectators and injured 120 more. However, the 1981 French Grand Prix at Dijon had proved popular and seen Alain Prost take his maiden win in an all-French car, so the circuit owners were keen not to miss out when the French Grand Prix moved back to Paul Ricard. A non-championship Swiss Grand Prix had been held at the circuit in 1975, won by Swiss driver Clay Regazzoni, and the Swiss Automobile Club were persuaded to lend their name and organisational resources to a second race in France. There was good news too for French race fans, as Didier Pironi was said to be recovering more quickly than expected from his injuries, and Enzo Ferrari also gladdened Gallic hearts by announcing that René Arnoux would be joining the Scuderia next year, alongside an as yet unnamed second driver, with a third car for Pironi as and when he was able to make use of it. The identity of this second driver was of course the subject of much speculation, and Patrick Tambay was considered a front runner thanks to his excellent record in the number 27 car so far. The prospect of 3 French drivers in the iconic Scarlet cars next year had the local fans practically salivating. For now, however, there was just the one Ferrari, with car 28 still having not been filled, and Tambay was suffering from pain in the shoulder from a pinched nerve, so few were expecting fireworks today. Elsewhere, Arrows debuted their 1983 car, the A5, with a single example for local driver Mark Sura. The team freely admitted they'd basically copied the Williams FW8, if you're going to crib from the best, but how it would go remained to be seen. The Dijon circuit was yet another fast circuit, but for once the Brabham team just couldn't get the setup right, and the 2 Renaults were able to reclaim the front row of the grid, with Alain Prost claiming his 4th pole of the year. Patrese was 3rd, a full second adrift of Arnoux' time, with Lauda and De Cesaris separating the 2 Brabhams, and a frustrated Piquet down in 6th. Daly outqualified Rosberg for once, the 2 Williamses lining up on row 4, with Giacomelli and Tambay 9th and 10th, the Ferrari driver having not set a time in the second session thanks to the ongoing pain in his arm. John Watson also continued his recent miserable form in 11th alongside Alboreto, while the new Arrows looked quite good in 14th place, just ahead of Austria winner De Angelis. New dad Nigel Mansell was down in 26th place after colliding with Brian Henton during qualifying, which had led to a full and frank exchange of views in the pit lane afterwards. Chico Serra, Tommy Byrne and Mauro Baldi were the unlucky 3 this week, Chico particularly unlucky as Patrick Tambay decided at the last minute not to race after all, but too late for the Fittipaldi driver to be promoted to the grid. This incidentally meant that for the second time this year, following the accident at Zolder, a race would be run with no Ferrari on the grid. Only the third, and still to this date the last, time in history that the Ferrari team had not started a race they'd entered. The Brabham team decided to split the difference in terms of strategy, with Piquet making a stop and Patrese running through. The circuit was quite short, so a pit stop cost about 3/4 of a lap, which meant that Nelson would need to catch and pass the leaders quickly if it was to work out. The sun was out, the fans were out in force, and the cars lined up on the grid with a gap in 10th place where Tambay's Ferrari should have been. The 2 Renaults got away perfectly and headed for the first corner in formation, with Patrese, Lauda, Rosberg and Piquet behind. By the end of lap 1, Prost and Arnoux already had a visibly increasing lead, while Piquet had rapidly made his way past the 2 Ford engine cars to take up position underneath Patrese's rear wing. If Ricciardo had orders to let him by, he did make Piquet work for it before finally succumbing at the end of lap 3. Prost was pulling out a lead over Arnoux too, and the second Renault soon had Piquet swarming all over the back of it, only for the defending champion to get it all wrong, go very wide and end up just in front of Patrese again, with it all to do all over again. This he did and got past seamlessly on the second attempt, going into turn 1, and setting off to try and see about Prost's lead of around 6.7 seconds. Meanwhile, Patrese was dropping back behind Rosberg and Lauda, and the Finn was soon bearing down on Arnoux himself. John Watson was running well and had made his way up to 7th before overtaking Patrese for 6th, most of which went unseen as the French TV director was much more interested in showing Prost circulating and lapping back markers in his Renault. Unfortunately for Watty, he damaged his side skirt in the charge and had to come in for a lengthy stop for a new one, which rather put the kibosh on his race and a big dent in his flagging championship hopes. Piquet, meanwhile, was still pursuing Prost, but with his half-distance pit stop rapidly approaching, was still the best part of 5 seconds behind. Jacques Laffite was another unhappy Frenchman, retiring on lap 33, fed up with the poor handling of his Ligier. It seemed like the good result in Austria had been something of a false dawn, as the team were all at sea in their home race. Piquet's stop was a slick 11.5 seconds, and he rejoined a rather distant 5th and some 40 seconds behind the leader Prost, with Arnoux now a comfortable 2nd, and Rosberg and Lauda 3rd and 4th. But slowly dropping back, and Piquet seemed to be having trouble too, the gap to Prost increasing to 54 seconds by the end of lap 57. By 3/4 distance it seemed to be all over bar the shouting as the Renault boys cruised to a comfortable 1-2 finish, but of course this was 1982 and things were never that simple. Both Renaults were suffering from minor ailments. Prost had damaged a skirt and was losing downforce, while Arnoux had a niggling misfire at high revs. Renault came in to have it looked at, but there was nothing obviously wrong, and the team sent him back out quickly with a splash of fuel, all of which put Rosberg up into 2nd place, and he was now closing in on Prost in the lead. Williams seemed to have got their cars set up to go well late in the race, and Rosberg evidently appreciated it. As Arnoux's engine expired with a fuel injection problem 4 laps from the end, Rosberg was right with Prost and scenting a win. A couple of laps from the end, a member of the inexperienced Swiss organisational team was spotted hanging around the pit straight with a checkered flag. Stories later circulated that a Williams mechanic was sent to go and thump him to make sure they didn't try flagging the race early to ensure a Prost home win. On track, though, the race had come alive in the last couple of laps as Rosberg once again caught up to an ailing lead car and threw the Williams around the track in spectacular fashion, trying to find a way past. On lap 78 he made it, diving inside the Renault at Parabolique. He just had to hold on for another lap and a half. The Williams team leaned over the pit wall to celebrate their man's maiden win, but no checkered flag went out. Rosberg and Williams were both pretty sure they'd counted right, but the Finn went round one more time just to make sure, and on lap 81 out of 80 he was officially flagged across the line. Rosberg joined Tambay and De Angelis, the third man in a row to take his first win, and the first for a Finnish driver. Prost finished 2nd, with Lauda gratefully inheriting 3rd after his usual smooth, unruffled race, but over a minute behind the leader. Nelson Piquet was a lap down in 4th, with Patrese and De Angelis 5th and 6th. Alboreto just missed out on the points in 7th, while Mansell had driven a great race to finish 8th from dead last on the grid. Rosberg's win took him to the top of the leaderboard with just 2 races to go, with 4 drivers now in the hunt for the title: Rosberg, Prost, Watson and Lauda. Ferrari's no-show had allowed the rest to close the gap in the constructors' standing, and the Scuderia would be hoping for a big result on home tarmac in Italy. A 1-2 finish in front of the Tifosi would secure them the title in the best possible way after such a traumatic year.